Okay, so now let's talk a little University of Kentucky football.
Right.
I expected something wild shirt-wise, and instead I got really just kinda
Can you see my
conservative.
badge? My
Oh,
NY This is my tribute to the NYPD.
nice.
Yeah. I got a
Okay.
buddy who's an NYPD cop.
So do you like the intro when I just say Dick Gabriel is wired to Kentucky like virtually nobody?
A couple of us have been on the beat for quite a while. Tom Leach has incredible depth, excuse me, depth of knowledge, as you know, in Kentucky football. I've just been around, me and another guy, Larry Vaught, we've been around since the mid 70s. So we've seen a lot and seen a lot of mediocrity, but right now we're seeing fairly good football. Not as good right now as it's been under Mark Stoops, but the potential's there.
By the way, you tell Tom Leach he's got a big fan in Nashville, Tennessee. That's
I'll do
me.
it.
I think he's an underrated, great play-by-play voice.
Inducted into the Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame on Monday.
Excellent. Didn't know it, but I'll congratulate him Saturday.
Yeah.
So y'all are hard to figure out right now because you've gone to the Watson Brown model, which is play 4 games at home in September that you ought to be able to win, and then you get into conference play with more confidence. So how good do you think Kentucky is?
Well, right now it's good, but I think it's a good team, but a sloppy team. Not from being undisciplined. I wouldn't say that, but it's just a team that's making uncharacteristic mistakes. We haven't seen this in Mark Stoops' team since they got over that hump, since they started going to bowl games. But you're talking, George, about pre-snap penalties, holding calls on the other side of the field where, you just shouldn't even be fooling with that kind of thing. You're talking about, and this, I think at times, and Kelly can speak to this, young receivers running the wrong routes and misconnecting with their quarterback. Just a myriad of little things that have added up. And what they've done is come at the worst possible times. It seems like they always come on third down, and they have short circuited a lot of drives. And just last Saturday, one of them erased a 60-yard touchdown pass. So, then that's against non-conference opponents. You know what happens when you join the SEC. That's big boy football. And with all due respect, even Vandy, and what people need to realize is how close this Vandy series is. You know it. Kelly knows it. There's only 5 wins by Kentucky that separate them. Otherwise, they're dead even.
Dick, you all went transfer portal for a quarterback. What are the early returns?
Well, some of the fans are restless already because Devin Leary's stats the first 2 games in the first halves of each game were underwhelming, to say the least. And then he turned it on in the second half in both games and delivered numbers similar to what he delivered at NC State. This past game, he was pretty good top to bottom. It was just that, like I said, some of his receivers dropped passes or ran the wrong routes. But he's also being asked to run a different kind of offense than he ran at NC State, with more of the downfield stuff. And he's still learning to connect with his teammates. And yeah, he's been here for a while, but once the real games begin, all the preseason stuff kind of goes out the window. But talking to a couple former players, one's a quarterback, one's a DB who knows how to prepare for quarterbacks. They both told me they are highly impressed with Devin Leary and the job he's doing.
You'll like this one. It's been, I don't know, about a month ago now. I went to see the Braves and the Mets, and David Cutcliffe met me. He
Ah,
lives in Birmingham. He's a big Braves fan. He had not been to the stadium, but I peppered him as the game got out of hand, go Braves, with a lot of, how did you do it at Duke? What was the get over the hump moment? For Stoops, I mean, it's now nobody questions anymore that what this guy has done is nothing short of brilliant. What started to get him over the hump?
better players, and that's an easy answer, but better players and more of them is the more accurate response. For years and years, and you've seen it at Vandy, Kentucky was able to play good teams, better teams, into the fourth quarter, and then the game would get away, and people would say things like they just didn't want it enough or they were out coached. No, they ran out of gas. And he has built enough depth now to where they can rotate D linemen, for crying out loud. And in the past, they've been able to rotate offensive linemen. But you know how it is. You've got to have numbers to compete in the SEC. And for the longest time, it was Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee scarfing up all the numbers. But more and more teams are doing a better and better job of building that depth. And now George, with the portal, figuring into all this, I mean, there's more and more parity, I think, in all of college athletics.
Yeah, absolutely. Kelly, say hello to Dick Gabriel, who just basically took our stupidity in stat of the day and just said, "I'm your daddy."
I'm just sitting here. Me and George need to talk before the show because he asks every question that I want to ask. It's kind of amazing. But and this may be an unfair question, and you just talked about the transfer portal. But do you think he's obviously had more depth? He's got more depth going on. Do you think that Coach Stoops can get the Kentucky Wildcats, who's always been known for basketball? It's a basketball state. Can he get those from being in the middle of the pack to being an upper echelon SEC school?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how consistently he can do that, but he's flirted with it, Kelly. And he was in a couple of different seasons, a few plays away from getting to Atlanta. So, it's just a matter of you got to catch Georgia at the right time. And now here's the problem. Divisions are going away. So that's going to make it, I think, tougher on the mid-level, the mid-tier teams like Kentucky and South Carolina and right now Tennessee and right now Florida, quite frankly. But I think so because I've seen them play for that right to go to Atlanta. And a couple of times they were pretty close. Another time they got blown out by Georgia, but, things happen. But it's got to be, I think, a year when maybe the powerhouse teams aren't quite as dominant, but you got to stay healthy. But I think the answer is yes, just not every year. They won't be in that same conversation every year. But quite frankly, I never thought I'd see the day where Kentucky flirted with 10 wins, every other year, and we'll go to a bowl game every year. Here in Lexington, we used to say 6 or 7 wins a year. They're going to put a statue on campus of whatever coach can do that and have a parade downtown. Now people grumble over 7 wins.
Don't you think that, we're talking about the transfer portal. Don't you think the transfer portal, and I think you hit it right on the head right there because it's created a lot of parity. And you look at what Alabama looks awful right now. They're not very good, but they lost a bunch of kids last year. But don't you think that the transfer portal, if you get the right guys, they can get him over that hump? And maybe, I don't know if you can be consistent. I'm like you, I'm not sure, but maybe you could.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You get the right kids through that portal and build with recruiting through the rest. Oh, of course you can. And it's interesting right now, Kentucky's kind of stuck in a cycle where it seems like they're looking at the portal every year for a quarterback. That's not quite the case, but they have done it. This will be the third year. After Levis had 2 years, this is the only year for Leary. Now they have recruited a kid here in Lexington who has potential to be a top-notch quarterback. But if they have to start him next year, I think that's a problem. So they may go back to the portal and find somebody else for next season, or maybe the backup kid this year earns a starting job. But to your point, yeah, if you do the right research. And now the other problem too is you can lose kids, and Kentucky lost a couple of good players through the portal, including one of their best D linemen.
So up until this point, I know, the 3 games that George has talked about. Now you're going into SEC play with Vanderbilt, but who has impressed you the most? Has it been the Leary kid? Has it been somebody else? Who's impressed you on both sides of the ball?
On the offensive side, a guy you know pretty well, Ray Davis. He coached Kentucky last year.
Yeah,
and he's been terrific. He has been absolutely terrific. It's interesting too with the receiving core. You had the 2 freshmen last year who lit it up, But the guy who has really been the most impressive and the most consistent is the guy you would think is the number 3 receiver in the rotation, and that's the slot guy, Tavion Robinson, who transferred in through the portal last year from Virginia Tech. Started out with guns blazing and then just kind of faded away. And he told us he was going to rededicate himself this year. And he has been their best receiver so far. So that's a name you'll hear, I think, a lot on Saturday. They've got a rotation of tight ends, Kelly, that's as good as I've ever seen at Kentucky. And I've been covering football here since the 70s. They've got the deepest set of tight ends I've ever seen. Defensively, you'll hear the name Trevin Wallace unless Vandy just does a great job on him. He is a freakishly talented linebacker, which you'd basically call a middle linebacker back in the day. He's been their best blitzer. He can cover. He can drop back in coverage. He plays the run. When I first met him, it was before his freshman year, and there was a little gathering of the UK Network people at a cookout in the summertime. He walked up to me and stuck his hand out and said, "Hi, my name's Trevin Wallace. You're going to be hearing a lot about me." And he wasn't lying. We really have. The Kentucky corners last week tackled extremely well. And they'll get tested, as you know, on Saturday. But on defense, it's Wallace and, of course, Deion Walker, the huge defensive lineman.
I got you. So my last question, just give me your overall assessment of the Southeastern Conference. To me right now, the Southeastern Conference is not playing very well, and they've got this motto. We always talk about it. I don't know if we make fun of it, but it just means more.
Well, it just means
But
more.
yeah, it just means more. But like they get blown out by Florida State. They've had some, get blown out by Utah. They've had some teams that are supposed to be this and that. Alabama's not playing good. Georgia hadn't looked very good. I mean, it took them to the wall. South Carolina did last week. So, just kind of, what are your thoughts about the SEC as a whole this year?
And maybe it doesn't mean as much as it should.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Final Four in basketball last year when you had a lot of teams that weren't necessarily name brands getting through the tournament, and a lot of that was because of the portal. It's been the great equalizer, and I think teams are running into that. Of course, the extreme, and I mean that in a positive way, example is Colorado. But right. I do think that it has brought some parity, and they have lost some of the depth that they've enjoyed. I'm talking about the powerhouse SEC teams. And you've got great players from last year moved on, other guys with an opportunity to play more, and maybe they're not living up right now to what they should be. So, I think it's kind of fun, though, because you never know who's going to do what, and you're never surprised, or you shouldn't be, I guess, unless an Alabama loses or a Georgia loses. And Alabama, by the way, in all fairness, lost to a pretty good Texas team.
Oh, really good.
Dick, real quick here. Thanks for coming on. Ray Davis, have you gotten a chance to talk to him about facing off with Vanderbilt? You think there's some extra motivation there?
Well, yeah, we've all talked to him. We talked to him in preseason. We talked to him after the game. We're going to talk to him again today. He is nothing but reverential when it comes to his time at Vanderbilt. He never misses an opportunity to talk about how much he cares about some of the guys who are still here, the coaches who are here, the pride he takes in having a degree from Vanderbilt. One of my buddies on the beat here, Daryl Bird of the Cat's Paws, wrote a tremendous article about Ray, and the challenges he went through in the Foster system and what it took to get him to D1 college football and eventually to Vanderbilt and now Kentucky. So I really believe the Big Blue Nation has fallen in love with Ray Davis. Now, a lot of that's got to do with the fact that he's a heck of a player. But as you guys know, he's a great talker. God help us, he wants to be in this business when he's done with football. So, no, he's been as good as advertised, maybe better.
And he's a great example of what the portal can do. Kentucky saw him run all over them last year, and boom, he's on their roster.
If he wants to get into broadcasting, he's not as smart as I thought.
As soon as they saw his name in the portal, they jumped, because you don't replace Chris Rodriguez overnight. And they've got some good kids in the running backs room with him, but they're not as good.
So I'm going on with you tomorrow morning.
Well, we're going to tape it in the morning.
Okay. Are we? Do you dare put me on like by Zoom where they see what I look like?
Strictly radio, brother.
Kelly, your thoughts?
He's got a face for radio, that's for sure.
We do tweet a photo to promote the show, so George, maybe that backfires on us. I don't know.
There's one.
Are you sure? Are you sure you want him on tomorrow?
Maybe it'll be an artist rendering,
like they do on Fox. That's beautiful.
Hey, I'm recording it, Kelly, so I can chop it up and make him say what I want.
Okay, you can edit it, so you're good.
Nice.
Sweet.
Nice.
Gotcha.
Dick, thank you as always.
My pleasure.